Guess how easy it would be to provide a bunch of free shit. And now we're condemned for saying, hey, we're going to scale back on this so we can take care of our country, which is what these nations have always been doing, only we are discussing scaling back to what we promised, 2%. We've been paying close to 4%. These nations have been lying, have been screwing us while providing entitlements. So I want to get to NATO here and the entire timeline of these nations, these arrogant, entitled nations. And I mean that, and I don't care anymore. Let me step back. As someone who was raised in Canada, I always know the game that is being played. When you see the Bernies of the world, when you see the leftists of the world, when you see the Democratic Party say, every other country provides insert whatever entitlement here. Now let's put that in the context of the nations who are supposed to be good neighbors, good allies, who actually provide these entitlements off of the backs of our defense. I want you to really closely connect the disproportionate amount of spending from the United States to protect Ukraine, by proxy, Europe, and just how much more as a percentage of their GDP these nations spend on entitlements. And hopefully you'll start to get the picture. But you've heard this ad nauseum. America is the bad guy because we don't have nearly as much free stuff as places like Europe, Canada, insert inferior nations here.
Why is it that the United States of America today is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right?
It's more affordable to treat everybody, it's possible to treat everybody, and people can get higher quality care than they ever could under our current privatized for-profit system.
The United States of America is less superpower and more failed state, where infant mortality lags behind Bosnia and Cuba.
This only happens in this country and nowhere else. Nowhere else do little kids go to school thinking that they might be shot that day.
Universal free meals for every child ought to be something that we're all dedicated to getting done.
So all that free stuff, I wonder why these European nations in Canada, I wonder why they've been able to splurge on these social programs. Does anyone? Noodles? Oh, there you go. That's right. Pre-Donald Trump, 72% of all the spending when you're talking about NATO has come from the United States. And let's also get that chart of the different nations and how much they spend based on their promises and the agreements. That's right. You can provide all of these things because you don't have to spend on your national defense. And by the way, this is not something new. You know that. This is not something new. Europe and Canada, they know that they are being bad allies and neighbors, and they still do it anyway. For years, American leaders have been begging them to step up and start honoring their word.
There is no substitute for nations providing the resources necessary to have the military capability the alliance needs when faced with a security challenge. Ultimately, nations must be responsible for their fair share of the common defense.
The situation in Ukraine reminds us that our freedom isn't free. And we've got to be willing to pay for the assets, the personnel, the training that's required to make sure that we have a credible NATO force and an effective deterrent force.
NATO members must finally contribute their fair share and meet their financial obligations. But 23 of the 28 member nations are still not paying what they should be paying and what they are supposed to be paying for their defense.
And that allows us to spend less time and less resources on the Middle East and focus more on East Asia. In the same way that we want our own allies to do the job in Europe so that we can focus on East Asia, I think that the same is true of the Sunni nations in Israel and the Middle East.
And of course, seeing that these nations have not met their contractual obligations, I guess there are no consequences if you don't. We know that the rest of us here in the United States, we're all thinking the same thing.
Stupid, worthless, no good goddamn freeloading son of a bitch, retarded, big mouth, know-it-all asshole jerk.
Mr. Hughes had a way with words. Absolutely. Oh, hold on. Your microphone is
That was me. I had
sneeze button.
I did hit the sneeze button. By the way, I think we have a chart just to illustrate the point. Yeah. Oh, you see that line? That's kind of where maybe we should be spending money, and there's only a handful of people there.
Yeah.
14 and 15. Us, Greece of all people.
Yeah, Greece of all people.
Well, when your
like
economy is really small, it doesn't count.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess, so.
And we're going to go through countries. All references available. Link in the description. What they've provided since they've signed on to NATO and not been spending what they've promised the rest of the world they would on defense. We're going to go through this country by country so that you can actually have some context here. Before that, none of this happens without you. Rumble Premium, it's $99 a year or $9.99 per month. Rumble Premium is Mug Club. Mug Club is Rumble Premium. That is why we're able to do this, discuss all of these issues. We don't make a dime off YouTube. You get Nick DiPaolo, Mr. Guns and Gear, Donald Trump Jr., Russell Brand, an hour more of this show. Now you get Tim Pool, and you get the entire experience ad-free. You wanted an alternative to YouTube? Here you go. The only reason we are able to do this and other conservatives are able to follow suit is because of Rumble, and it's funded by viewers like you. I'm not just saying that like PBS or NPR when they receive federal funding.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this. People say Donald Trump mean, okay? Before Donald Trump, no one was even close to honoring their agreement as far as spending. Now, when I say NATO spending, it's shorthand for they promised to spend a certain percentage of their GDP on their military, on their defense in order to be a part of NATO. That's almost the key to membership. So no one was doing this. Let me ask you this. Do you think Ukraine, well, even though they're not NATO, but do you think Europe, do you think these nations would be better off if they'd have actually built up a military? Do you think they'd be safer? Do you think they would be facing this instability with a threat like Russia or potentially China if they would have done what they promised they would do? Is it mean for Donald Trump to be the only president in modern history to call them to task? I don't think so. I don't think that stern equals mean. I think demanding that your friends do the right thing when they promised you they would, I just think that's the right thing to do. And I think it's better for all nations. Let's look at Canada. Everyone talks about Michael Moore loves Canada. He always talks about their health care and how friendly they are. Yep. I mean, it has 1/10 the population of the United States. They've been a member of NATO since 1949. Okay? Again, the target for all these nations is 2% of their spending, meaning 2% in relation to their GDP should be spent on military and defense in order to be in NATO, right? So collectively, NATO is a power, 2%. They missed it, of course, Canada. Their spending was about 1%. About 1%. So about half of what they promised. And remember that montage? Everyone's saying, oh, all these other countries have. Okay, so cut their guaranteed, their promised spending in half. And during that same time, since they've been in NATO, what have they done? They've provided universal health care. Hey, free health care. Well, I guess you have that $344 billion annually, 12% of your GDP when you're not spending on your military. Isn't that nice? Hey, shouldn't $100 billion of that be going to honor your word? They spent over $1 billion on zero-emission buses, which has been nothing but a problem. They spent billions subsidizing the planting of 2 billion trees. Didn't meet their NATO spending, though. Well, you know what? If the United States wasn't overspending on NATO, guess how easy it would be to provide a bunch of free shit. And now we're condemned for saying, hey, we're going to scale back on this so we can take care of our country, which is what these nations have always been doing. Only we are discussing scaling back to what we promised, 2%. We've been paying close to 4%. These nations have been lying, have been screwing us while providing entitlements. We're saying, let's just pay our actual promise so that we can help Americans. That's the evil? Let's go to France. They've been in NATO since 1949. They missed their target of 2% spending. You bring that up, did they miss it by 1.79%, or have they been spending 1.7?
They've been spending 1.79.
1.79%.
It's close.
Close. It's close.
Of all countries.
It's close. Many years they didn't.
Come on.
We spend about 3.6 to 4, depending on the year. Some years have been over 4. During that time, what did France do? Universal health care. Again, another $340 billion annually.
Jeez.
Free subsidized meals for employees. That's a few $1 billion. $120 million spent on state visits at the French presidential palace.
That's a good line.
Not to mention people throw a fit if you want to raise the retirement age. Of course, all the social my point is this: they actually shouldn't even have any social safety nets until they meet their spending and until they reach their back pay. And I certainly demand that the rest of these nations don't bitch about us saying, we're going to scale back so that we can secure our own border. We are effectively securing the borders of these other countries. That's what we're really arguing. Borders with Ukraine. Where those borders line up. Why in the hell should we be subsidizing any type of war for territory there when we're not even allowed to protect our own? Let's go to Germany. Germany, they've been a member since 1955. They've been spending, again, 2% target, 1.2%. 1.2%. So they have not honored their agreement, but they spend $522 billion annually on universal health care while they tell us arrogantly, you Americans, you're the only country that doesn't provide universal health care. Well, yeah, you know what? But you guys break your word. It's really easy to do. Yeah, the 522. How about no billion to any other entitlements until you just honor your promise? By the way, during that same time, they can't possibly meet their military spending. They're agreed upon 2%. They declared internet a human right for all. So that's going to be free for everybody.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They created basically propaganda broadcasting as well, right? Similar to Canada's CBC, to Deutsche Welle, $430 million a year. So you can't honor your international agreement where this is long-standing tradition. Yeah, but instead of actually honoring the contract, you funded socialized health care and $430 million on a broadcast corporation. Couldn't you just let companies do broadcasting, especially now with social media? Oh, that's right. You have to control your population because you don't have freedom of speech.
Right. How else are they going to control what you say
and
arrest you for what you say on the internet if you're paying for it yourself? You know?
Right there, $430 million a year. All of that. Go right into the military. Socialized healthcare, make some cutbacks. Put $100 billion. There you go. They can do it. They just don't want to. Because they expect us to do it. Spain, let's go to España with their stupid list. They've been there in there since 1982, I believe. 0.9%, not 2%, 0.9%.
Come on.
Less than half. Less than half.
Second to last.
But during that time, they increased their universal health care, $95 billion annually. That's 6% of their GDP. They have taxpayer-funded vacations for seniors.
What?
Yep. Seniors get to go on subsidized vacations, a 10-day vacation, $475. So,
do they come back?
Right. Yeah,
exactly. That's a good question.
If they don't come back, I'm not, maybe not against it.
Just think about that. You're paying less than half and you're subsidizing vacations for old people's photo albums. There should be no photo albums. There should be no old people. You should be speaking another language because you don't have the ability to defend yourself, and we only allowed you to be a part of this organization because you promised you'd spend 2% of your GDP. You didn't do it. You're out. They spent over $1 billion, $1.5 billion on airports they never used.
What?
Use that to buy some javelins. It's pronounced javelins.
Javelin.
Sweden. Ugh.
Oh, boy.
So now they joined in 2024. But I have the same problem because they're coming into it late.
Yeah.
They're coming. We're going to be neutral. Yeah. Well, no. You don't get to do that and then join once there's a threat. That's like getting health insurance after you got refused a Lyft ride because you're 600 pounds. But they might have to rethink Sweden.
This is their GoFundMe.
Yeah. Your universal health care, $70 billion annually. That's 11% of your GDP. We're going to have to shift some of that. Your parental leave, I believe they have both maternal and paternal. It's 480 days. 390 of those are paid at 80% wages.
Dude, I'd be having so many kids.
Yeah. Well, the good news is it's already falling apart in Sweden because of all the migrants who've come in, so they've had to subsidize that as well. The government is now paying migrants $34,000 to return home.
Because they have kids in litters.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Ordered?
So we look at this. Putin is bad, but Zelensky is a symptom of the greater problem. It is this entitlement.
Wait, can I get $34,000 if I go to Sweden right now and get kicked out? Can you guys give me a week off to do this?
Yes.
Yes, and we would demand that you be as obnoxious as possible.
I'll give you 2% of that.
Yes. Go in and be the drunken American that they can't stand. And let's see how fast they kick you out.
Easy for me.
Just keep coming back.
Sweden, what have you given the world aside from
meatballs,
fish and birth control and books that fold into armoires or whatever the hell it is?
More than meets the eye. IKEA.
And also, let's look at all these countries. They've also given the world nothing in like 200 years. Let's be real about this. Sweden, Spain, Canada. You know, Germany, you gave us some stuff. You gave us a reason to come together to kick your ass, so I guess you were a great unifier in that sense.
Yeah.
That's what Zelensky is. He embodies this entitlement and this arrogance of, well, you will feel it soon. You know what? I don't think we will.
Yeah.
I think you'll feel it sooner because you've been living high on this hog and it is subsidized by the United States. Not to mention, by the way, these other nations who provide socialized healthcare, that's because they don't provide anywhere near the R&D into new medical innovations or pharmaceuticals. They benefit from the United States, and then they slap tariffs on our goods, and then they demand that we step in and protect them. Hey, the whole reason for NATO is so that everyone shoulders this together, and these nations are not. These nations are not. Yeah. And we are now in an era where people are saying that the United States is being selfish simply to carry out what is legitimately under the purview of government, which means having borders and ensuring that our citizens are safe. We're not saying, hey, we won't contribute to NATO so we can give everyone here free internet. We're not saying, hey, we're not going to fund we're not going to honor our NATO agreement. Hey, we're not going to support Ukraine so we can start a new program to send seniors to Greece for $400. We're not saying, hey, you know what? We're going to leave Ukraine out in the cold so that we can have over 400 days parental leave. We're not doing that. We're saying, well, you've been doing all this shit for this long. You know what? We actually think we have to protect our borders, and we have an economic crisis here. We have a drug crisis with fentanyl. We need to focus on that. You guys, free internet, free healthcare across the board. You're welcome, by the way. Wouldn't exist without the United States subsidizing that either. Free vacations, free meals, free birth control, free parental leave. As you look down your noses and judge the United States. If we didn't have to support the rest of the world, if we just changed all this and said, you know what, we're not protecting you at all. You're right, we have a nice ocean. We think that's enough. We're gone. No NATO. You get no subsidies from us whatsoever. Oh, and by the way, if we invent something, if it's created in the United States, you don't get to use it unless you pay a tax or a tariff. You don't get to subsidize the drugs that we invent or the machines that we create, like MRIs, new imaging technology. You don't get to benefit from it if you guys aren't honoring your part of the agreement. Do you have any idea how different that world would look? So when you travel abroad and you have these people who say, you Americans are so blah, blah. Yeah, you know what? Hey, they've said we're arrogant for a long time. Good. Let's be arrogant. Let's be arrogant.
We're going to start acting it. I have a proposal for you. If you're one of the countries who hasn't spent the 2% number, and J.D. Vance actually raised that to 4 or 5.
It should be.
When he was over in Europe saying, hey, you guys should probably step up just a little bit. You get to call all of the other countries who haven't spent the 2% when you need help.
Right.
The only people that get to call us are the countries that have met historically since we
Poland.
Did that. Right, yeah. And apparently Greece for
Poland
some reason.
And Greece.
Yeah. You guys get to call the United States. The UK, I think, is now finally there. Everybody else, you've got to call somebody in your category. It's the 2-tier version of NATO. Yep. I'm fine with it.
Poland and Greece, only Greece if we come, we're taking the island of Lesbos.
I think it's a bit of a bait and switch.
Oh no? It's not what I'm expecting?
I mean, it's an island, but nothing else.
Hey, if you're still watching this, I appreciate it. Because in today's day and age, people watch for 30 seconds. It's like a dancing nurse or a cat. So thank you. You can also tune in live weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern. And now, this. If you click it. Otherwise it's nothing. In a way, if you click it, you are the one who created that video, because right now you exist on a timeline where it may not exist. But if you click it, you make it exist.